thanks for being here today, guys. Like Justin said, my name is Clay Scott. I am a member of the field support team here at Precision Planting, formerly a member of the product support team. Very similar in terms of their roles. However, like Justin said, I grew up here in Ohio, a couple hours from here up by Canton, Ohio. And so I'll be moving to north central Ohio, where I will be helping farmers just like you guys work through your now PTX portfolio products. So that would be the formerly Trimble Ag products as well as Precision Planting. The majority of my background is in the Precision Planting line of things. I've been out there a couple years now, and so I've really been developing those skills, and I really want to be able to help you guys have the best planter performance we possibly can, because at the end of the day, that's what pays my paycheck, that's what pays your guys' paycheck. So if we can all have a paycheck, that's a good day, right? So that was kind of my introduction about me. That's my girlfriend and myself up there out in the field in Illinois. We were doing some scouting. So her family farm's up there in north central Ohio, so we're gonna move back that direction and hang out there. So anyways, that's enough about me. We're gonna get started with this planter performance stuff today. So there's gonna be a lot of different stuff we're gonna cover. The reason I call this planter performance is because it's not just planter maintenance. We're gonna talk through, if you guys have questions about stuff, I wanna be able to answer those questions, and just some best practices. Not necessarily maintenance in general or in specific, but maybe setting things, maybe doing things a little differently than what your neighbor does. So if you have questions, make sure you ask those, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. So I've got a picture up here of a Fendt 1000 series with a brand new Harvest International, and that's not the point of this slide. The point of this slide is on the other side, on the right side there, and it says the perfect pass starts with you. At the end of the day, we can spend a lot of money on technology. We can do every planter clinic under the sun. We can eat all the free lunches we can, but at the end of the day, the perfect pass starts with you. So you guys are in the driver's seat. You guys are making those decisions in terms of management, in terms of what we're gonna do on this planter pass. It all starts with you guys. So hopefully we can educate you guys and teach you guys what we see at Precision Planting do well, what we see show a positive yield benefit for you guys. So why do we always talk about planter performance? The picture on the right? We don't want those. That's why we stress planter performance so much. That's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that we're not getting those, because that's money that we lost, right? So the way that we end up with stuff like that is we probably took a hit on Emergence, right? That's where it all started. Everything starts with Emergence, and if we took a hit there, we had that plant that was maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 leaf collars behind of its neighbors. That's where we're ending up with things like that. So we need to make sure we've got nice, even emergence. All those plants are coming out together as a field. We want to make sure that's in that 12 to 24-hour range. All of those guys are coming up pretty consistently, which, if I remember back to Webster's session this morning, I think the majority of you guys answered that we've got pretty decent emergence in this area. You guys aren't super widespread on that. So that's really good. That means that you guys are coming to clinics like this. You guys are learning about emergence, learning about why we want to do these things, which is now resulting in you guys having even emergence, right? So some different things that can cause uneven emergence. So the first one on the left I want to talk about is maintenance, right? We got to have good planter maintenance. We got to make sure everything's in shape before we're going out to the field, because if we drop the ball there, it doesn't matter if we have residue on the seed. It doesn't matter if we've got uneven planting depth, if we've got incorrect planter settings, because if we didn't do the maintenance, we can't control any of that. We have totally lost control of everything else on this page if we didn't start with maintenance. So what else can cause a hit to emergence? Maybe residue on the seed. So the folks from PTI a number of years ago did a study, and even some folks that now work in support were a part of this study, where they say this is the day I realized I didn't want to work for Jason Webster. Because what they did was they went out and they tied up all their closing tails on the planter, right? No closing tails down. They went out, they planted seed, and then the interns got there. And they all grabbed a piece of bean stubble, and they went by, and they'd put one beside a seed. And then they'd go, crawl a couple feet, put another one down. And so they did this on a 25, 50, and I believe 75% of the seeds basis. So all these interns were out there covering acres of open planted trenches, inoculating plants with residue. So that was the day that a lot of those guys realized, maybe I'll find something that's a little more office oriented as opposed to working for Jason, right? So residue on the seed can cause a big hit to emergence. Uneven planting depth. So this is a simple one for us to correct. We can go through and we can do a block check and we can get that corrected. Last one there is incorrect planter settings, and we'll get into some of that later here in the presentation. So what's the cost, right? Because if it doesn't cost us anything, we probably shouldn't even care about it. If we're not losing money, I'm not going to put any bandwidth towards that. So what we found here at Precision Planting, and you guys will have to apologize, or I have to apologize to you guys. I had to redo this presentation at 2 o'clock this morning, so I've got last year's slide up here of $5.68 corn. I understand we're not in that market anymore. Give me some grace. I built this presentation this morning. I had to do a total redo. Whenever I got here yesterday, my laptop wouldn't turn on. So cut me a little slack, but the numbers are still accurate in terms of how much we're losing on a bushel per acre basis. So if we've got one plant, so we're going to start out here on the left. If we've got one plant that's one collar behind every 17.5 feet, what's 17.5 feet? What does that represent? 1,000th of an acre, yep. So in this instance, we would have 1,000 of those in an acre, right? It's pretty easy to find stuff like that in the field, guys. If we go walk, we don't have to walk very far. We're like, oh, look, there's one there. And for me, I'm not a super tall guy, but I'm about 6 foot, so I take a couple steps. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. Oh, there's another one. Well, now I've already covered that 1,000th of an acre, and I found 4 already, right? So I'm only talking about 1 here, and that's costing us 3.5 bushels an acre. And on this slide, we had a loss potential of $5.68 was our bushel price, and then that gets us down to $19.88 an acre. So if I tie that to 100 row acres, and what I mean by 100 row acres is I've got a 16-row planter and I plant 1,600 acres with it. Every row on that 16-row planter planted 100 acres. So if I extrapolate that out across my entire operation, now I've lost $2,000. If we get a plant that's 2 collars behind over here on the right, that was a total loss. We didn't even get that guy in the combine. That was a total loss, and we lost almost $4,000. So that's why I am so passionate about planter maintenance, because it really doesn't cost a lot to keep our planters in check whenever we've got this much on the line, right? So we've got a huge, huge possibility of loss, and it doesn't cost a lot to avoid this. So with that, I'm going to roll into a little bit more about the technology. So Precision Planting, I will admit that we make some really cool technology. We make some really farmer-focused technology. That's a big thing that we try to strive for. Precision Planting is, how is this going to benefit a grower? Because if it's not going to benefit you guys as growers, there's no point in us making it. We want to help your bottom line, so we've made all this technology to do that. But if we drop the ball on planter maintenance right here, that was our bridge between us getting that dollar, right? So we can keep putting all that technology on there, but if we're forgetting all of these maintenance components up here, we might as well not even mess with it, right? So we can't stress how important emergence is enough, or maintenance is enough, because of its impact on emergence. So with that, we're going to start into the planter maintenance heavy session. We're going to talk through individual components on the planter, talk through each individual piece, part, how we check them, how we decide when to replace them, all those different things. So this is going to be our agenda for the day, going through this PowerPoint. So we're going to talk about the planter bar. That's where it's got to start at, right? We got to have a nice, level, checked out planter bar before we start putting the meters on, before we check the parallel arms, before we check the row cleaners, before we're looking at seed tubes and seed tube guards. When we start thinking about opening disc, we need to make sure that our seed tube guard was good first. Then we need to talk about gauge wheels, check our depth. We need to check out our closing tails. We need to see what those look like. And then the last thing I want to finish up with is wintertime maintenance, right? Because that's something we can go out and do today, right? There's a lot of these things of whether it's open furrow trials or things like that. Today we probably actually could, right? We've had a little bit of warm weather. We probably actually could go do some stuff outside. But generally speaking, we're not able to. So what are things that you guys can go home and do today to get you guys set up for a better spring 2025? So we're going to start out talking about leveling the planter bar. As you can see here, we've got a nice level planter bar on this one. And so we've got a picture of an incorrect setting here. So what do we see that's wrong? We got a planter bar that's rolled forward. So you can see right here, the top of the planter bar is rolled forward. Ooh, sorry about that, guys. is rolled forward. We're aimed towards the tractor. It's not level across the top. And what has that done? We've now picked this point up higher because we rotated that forward. We picked the back up, and that's now made our row unit run at an angle, right? Our parallel arms also aren't running to the ground because, again, that's higher. So this is a very bad planer bar setting. We can work around some issues as far as if the bar is maybe a little bit too high, the bar is maybe a little bit too low. The parallel arms can kind of compensate for some of that. But if that planer bar isn't level, guys, we've got big issues up here on the furrow creation side of things, because now our point of contact on our disc is deeper than it should be. So we're making a trench that's deeper than it should be. We've got potentially a Keaton seed firmer or a furrow jet that's not pressing down hard enough if it's a Keaton. We've got furrow jets that might even be out of the ground, right? Because we've rotated those up out of the way. And then when we come back through to try to close, we don't have enough tension on our closing tail. Or, heaven forbid, it's not even touching the ground, right? So, getting the planer bar set correctly is going to be super important for making sure we've got a successful year. All right, so I call this one the better bar setting, so that's exactly what I was just talking about. We've now leveled out this planer bar. We've still got some issues with our parallel arms, but our planer bar is level. Now our shank is running parallel to the ground. We're not causing a depth problem. Our Keaton's got the right tension. Our closing tail can do what it's supposed to do. But the problems that we're still running into are we're limiting that upward travel, because in this case the bar is too low. So we're limiting that upward travel in case we encounter something in the field that we need to come up. If we don't have enough travel to keep going up, what's going to happen? Things are going to get really tight really fast, right? If I run over a groundhog hole and this can't go up anymore, it's going to go up, right? We're not just going to push through it. In a lot of cases, it's still got to go up. It's just taking the rest of the planer with it, right? And that's where we start to get cracking on the bar and things like that. So getting those parallel arms set level is going to be really important. So as you can see here, this is our final picture with this planer. And we got the bar set level. We've got our parallel arms running parallel to the ground. Our shank is parallel. Our hitch height is now correct. That's how we got our parallel arms straightened out. We picked that hitch up a little bit, got those leveled out, and we're good to go. So now, if we're running something like a spring system, we've got the correct down pressure on those, right? So we have also now got our row unit level in the seed bed again, so we're getting those seeds at the bottom of the trench and all that. So, any questions on the planer bar? We're all good there? All right. I've got way too much information and not enough time, so we're going to kind of roll through it fast, but I want to make sure I get any questions answered that you guys have. All right. We're going to move right into the meter drive system. So, what are we going to look for? The first thing here is going to be these drive dogs at the fold points, right? If we're still running a chain drive planer, we need to make sure we're maintaining those to an even higher standard than we would maybe an electric drive planer or a hydraulic drive planer, if we've got hydraulic drives in each section, that is at least. So we need to make sure these drive dogs are lined up. If we don't have these drive engagement points lined up, that's going to cause loping, okay? So as those are running opposing each other, we're going to get population spikes and falls, spikes and falls, spikes and falls. This is something that we get a call on every year in product support. I can promise you, every year someone is going to call in until we get everyone in the world away from chain drive. Someone is going to call in and say, I put this 2020 seed sense on, and that's not right. My population's going up and going down, going up and going down. And eventually we get around to it that we've actually got a meter drive problem, okay? So make sure you're checking that alignment at the fold points, and I want to make sure that we're catching these in the shop. This is the time of year to catch these errors, right? Because when we're in the field, we want to go, we want to get stuff done. We don't want to be questioning whether or not we maybe missed something when we're in the shop. So, on the chain and sprocket side of things, we want to make sure that our chains are lubricated. The only way to service planer chains is with a pair of bolt cutters, okay? That's the only way you can fix a planer chain. Take a set of bolt cutters to it, cut them off, and replace them. Otherwise, we end up with stuff like this. Now we've got skipping, jumping, we're binding on that chain, and again, we're causing population issues. So all of this stuff there's a huge number of components that play into the system. All of this stuff is directly impacting your singulation, your spacing, and your population. So last thing I got up here is wear on the sprocket can cause chatter. So if we get more than too far down on that sprocket, we can actually get that chain to kind of chatter on that sprocket, and then we're going to further wear our chains. So just make sure we're checking stuff out or having your dealer check it out and get those problems fixed. So the last thing I got here on the meter drive is the idler and tensioner. So those plastic idlers, I honestly think they're a terrible idea, but it's just what we've been using, right? So we're going to keep using them until, like I said, we get everybody switched over to electric drives. We're going to keep using these. We need to make sure that we don't have too much wear on those idlers, and we need to make sure that when we're running across the idler, that chain is actually going straight across the idler. Because if we're going at an angle across there, eventually it's going to catch, and it's going to wear a groove directly across, and that thing's never going to spin again. So make sure we are dead center on the idler, and it's turning that thing all the time. Okay, so parallel arms. So oddly enough, we have a parallel arm distributor right here. We've got two of them actually. We've got GBGI, Precision Planning. We all have a parallel arm option. So this is something we need to always make sure that we're checking every year. This is one thing that I think guys actually spend a lot of time focusing on. This is something that we talk about quite a bit is parallel arms. So we're not going to go to the next slide yet. So in terms of parallel arms, like I said, there's multiple different distributors and options out there. I'm not here to tell you who's better and who's worse, but I want to make sure that you guys are checking these, and I'm going to teach you how to check them here quick. So the first thing that I'm looking for whenever I'm checking out parallel arms is actually side-to-side movement. There's a big debate around how much up and down travel is actually considered acceptable. So for me, if I can shake that row unit side to side, it's probably got some wear to it, right? Because a lot of times those bushings will actually hold longer in a straight fashion than they will up and down. They're a little bit tighter tolerance that way. So when I'm looking at them, if I can move them side to side, that's whenever I'm thinking about doing some parallel arms. So when we're doing that, make sure that we're replacing the bushings, the arms, and the bolts when we're doing this as a kit, right? Let's try to avoid just doing bushings or try to avoid just putting bolts in. Let's try to do it as a full kit if we can and keep those tight. So just a shameless plug here while we're talking about it. DuraWare from Precision Planning, it's just a 2-bushing design. We've got one hardened bushing in the arm, a softer bushing in the center, so that they're meant to be a more serviceable item as opposed to a particular arm here that comes from a really big OEM that once that bushing wears, it's already worn into the arm to the point that the arm's also junk, right? We can see daylight through this here, so that arm is no longer serviceable. So by the time we're putting bushings in a lot of those, they're not worth using anymore. All right, so parallel arms when we're installing new components. This one right up here at the top is by far one of the most important ones I can tell you guys. This is again something we run into and support all the time, is make sure we're actually torquing those to their recommended torque spec. If they're too loose, you guys are actually losing money because they're going to wear out faster than they should be because they're flopping around, and now you're going to be replacing those earlier. Down here at the bottom, if they're too tight, it's actually going to start to have an impact on our downforce management. So whether that's a spring system, an airbag system, or a individual row hydraulic system, it's going to have an impact on our downforce if we over tighten those. So make sure that we're using a torque wrench on those. Don't get carried away with the impacts. Just things like that can help when we're doing these arm installs. So anything on parallel arms? All right. So our next thing up here is going to be our row cleaners or our residue managers. There's a lot of different designs out there, options, manufacturers. We could talk about this for an hour in itself, right? I'm not here to debate that, but I want to talk about how can we service them and what do we need to be looking at when we're thinking about a row cleaner and how we're going to be using that. So first thing up there is do the blades turn free? Obviously that's going to be important to cleaning the row and not bulldozing the row. We need to make sure that those cleaning wheels are turning free. So when I'm talking about the cleaning wheels, I'm talking about these guys right here. So those ones that are actually doing the row cleaning, we want to make sure those are turning free. And I want to see if there's any side-to-side movement. So just like my parallel arms, I'm going to grab that and shake it side to side and see if we've got a bunch of side-to-side movement. The reason that I want to check that is we could actually start to create some issues in terms of furrow creation and residue inoculation whenever we start getting off to one side or the other, because that residue manager is moving residue to one side or the other. And so if we're off center when we're going across the field, now we're moving all that residue potentially to where we're going to go plant. Then we can start hairpinning residue in the trench and have an issue that way. So middle one there, pretty obvious one. Is the mounting bracket secure? These things take a beating when they're going across the field, so let's just be checking our mounting brackets, making sure they're still secure, either to the planter bar or to the row unit. And then do they travel freely? Obviously, we want to make sure they're moving up and down good. But another thing we can be checking right now in the wintertime is our air system still in check? So if we've got clean sweep cylinders on there, or potentially airbags, let's go ahead and be checking and making sure that we still have a functional system. And the last thing, this is probably one of the more important ones, have we made the right decision on what cleaning wheel or blade we're using? So in product support, we take calls from all over the country and really all over the world. So here in Ohio, you guys are going to use something real similar to this. Some of you guys are going to maybe use a fatter one that's maybe more of a no-till kind of guy that wants to move like more of a cover crop mix out of the way. If you go down to Texas, they don't use cover crops down there. They power farm it, and they power farm powder, okay? So when they're out planting, they've got this much dry dirt out there, and then they've got moisture. So they're using their row cleaners to actually move dirt out of the way. They're bulldozing dirt out of the way. So we need to make sure, hey, did we make the right decision with our row cleaners of they're not going to use these, right? If they could put a disc on there and they could sweep it out of the way that way, they'd be more than content, right? So we need to make sure maybe our farming practices have changed over the years, and so maybe we need to make a decision about, hey, let's take these finger style wheels off and maybe go to more of a blade style wheel if we're starting to get into some more cover crops or some of those mixes. So again, we've got a lot of different styles of row cleaners. Fixed, a pin adjust or a screw adjust. Man, if you guys are starting off and you don't have a row cleaner, I'm really going to push you to go one step higher and go to one of these four over here, right? If we're just getting started into this, let's skip this step and then let's start over here. So this is kind of the progression of how row cleaners have evolved over the years. So once we got past fixed, we went to floating, right? That was really good because now we're not plowing near as much as we used to be, and we're still getting ground engagement whenever we're going over some other terrain. And then we realized, hey, if we get a little aggressive with this, we can really start to cause some issues. So let's put a treader wheel on there, right? So that treader wheel now keeps us, that's a depth band. That's going to keep us from going too deep and creating trenches that are going to then fill up with water. And we're going to crust if we get a rain event directly after planting. And then we're like, well, that's pretty good, but man, sometimes I'd really like to just pick those row cleaners all the way up out of the way. And that's when we added clean sweep. Now we can pick those row cleaners all the way up out of the way. Or if we're, again, in some of those cover crop scenarios, we can now put air pressure and hold that row cleaner down against the ground and actually cut and sweep residue out of the way to create a landing strip, if you will, for our planter to run across. The last one up here is Reveal from Precision Planting. And there's a lot of the similar technology. As things have progressed, we had the cleaning wheel, then we added the pivot, then we added the shredder, then we added the airbag, and then we got to Reveal. So we've got pivots, we've got shredder wheels, we can actually add the wheel now actually. So now we've got independent control of cleaning depth and pressure. Because if you look at this guy here, we had two decisions we could make. We could put a lot of pressure, we're going to be really aggressive, and we're going to go deep. We're going to take pressure off, we're going to be not as aggressive, and we're not going to go as deep. With Reveal, we can actually set the depth of these tines to how deep we want to go, and then we can set the airbag pressure on this wheel to keep that thing glued to the ground. So it just gives us an independent way to control those row cleaners. But why should you care about row cleaners, right? We've been running them for years, Clay. You're not telling me anything new. Move on. This is why we should care about row cleaners. So this was a trial that they did at the PTI farm in Pontiac, Illinois on May 26, 2016. And so what they were looking at is what is the temperature difference in the clean strip versus the coverage strip. So what does a corn plant need to emerge? Heat, water, right? So if we've got moisture, the only thing that we can now control is the heat, right? We're not going to be able to put enough water out there to control that aspect of it. So we need to start thinking about how can we manage this heat, and that's where our row cleaners come into play. So in this trial, at 10:25 in the morning, the coverage strip was 71 degrees at planting depth, and the clean strip was 81. Why was that? What color shirt do you wear in the summertime if you want to stay cool? Probably not black Illinois dirt, right? So that's exactly what's happening here. That clean strip was that dark Illinois soil, and that solar radiation or solar heat was absorbing into that dirt and warming that dirt up so much faster. We were 10, and then 9, and then 15 degrees positive as the day went by on that clean strip over the coverage strip. So we're going to get more even emergence, we're going to get faster emergence, and we're going to have healthier plants. So that's why we need to pay so much attention to our row cleaners. So I threw a little slideshow in here from Webster and the folks up there at the PTI farm. So I talked earlier about the residue in the trench, right? So every year those interns get the same fun experience of inoculating plants with residue. And so what we found actually is that in a row cleaner scenario, so we've got 100% lift, which is here in the blue, you guys, the grower, making the setting, or straight. So those are our three options. In every trial since they started this, and I believe it was in 2016 or 17 when they started this trial, every year, you guys knew what you were doing. Every year, the grower setting beat 100% lift or 0 float. And I believe it's also beat some value of down. I forget what that one is. But every year, the grower setting, which is either Jason, Mark, or Jacob, they've always picked the right setting, or a better setting than what you could do with a simple floating or a lifted row cleaner. So we're trying to avoid this. Let's make sure that we're paying attention when we're running our row cleaners, making sure that they're in good repair. So next thing I want to jump into is seed delivery. And the most important part of your seed delivery system is the seed tube guard. And you'll say, Clay, you guys don't make near as much money on seed tube guards as you do selling speed tubes. I'd say you're exactly right, but I would much rather sell you a seed tube guard than I ever would a speed tube. Because if you start the foundation with a seed tube guard, now when you make the decision to go to a speed tube, you're built for the future, right? You've now put a seed tube guard in there, and now we've got a properly sized furrow that's wide. We can get our seed all the way to the bottom, and then we can come through and close that effectively by replacing those seed tube guards. So what happens if we neglect doing that? This right here. Look at that. I can fit a whole pencil underneath that seed in that trench. And the reason for that is we hadn't replaced the seed tube guard on this planter for quite a while. So as that seed fell down in the bottom of the trench, it was not getting all the way there, okay? So one thing I feel like comes up quite a bit and I always like to touch on is this right here is not fixed by a seed firmer. Seed firmers don't fix planter maintenance. So if this seed got all the way down to here, it would make it look just like that pencil. It'd be firmed into the bottom of the trench, and we'd have good seed-soil contact, okay? But a Keaton seed firmer does not fix this problem. The only way to fix this is by replacing your seed tube guard, okay? Build that foundation for your seed tube or your seed delivery system to get that seed to depth and good seed-to-soil contact and let that firmer do its job. So, what are we looking for in terms of seed delivery? As you can see right here, well, you can't really see it in this picture nearly as well, but this one here, the corner of this seed tube is actually worn off. It used to look just like this. So the corner of that seed tube is actually worn off. And so what can actually start to happen is as that plastic wears, it's going to get thin and it's going to start to curl. And as it curls, it's going to curl inside the seed tube. So now as those seeds are falling down through there, right, 34,000 or 110,000, it doesn't matter. As they're falling down through there, they're going to catch that little lip, and now we've created a spacing problem because that one didn't fall straight into the bottom of the trench. It hit and bounced, and then it ended up there. And now we've got a double, what looks like a double, and as we're trying to evaluate this in the spring after everything's emerged, we're going to say, man, these meters just really struggled this year. Well, maybe it wasn't the meter. Maybe it was just a seed tube problem that looks like a metering problem, okay? So we've got nowhere at the bottom. We've got misdirected seed, bad spacing and placement. So we've already covered all that stuff. We're going to roll on here into opening discs. So opening discs are something that obviously you guys are going to pay attention to. It's something that's a common replacement item or a common wear item on your planters. So first one up here, what are we going to look out for? Is there any severe chipping? So it's Ohio. We got some rocks around here, right? We can start to get some chips in some of these blades. We want to make sure that we're avoiding that when we're thinking about replacing blades. If you've got chips like this is definitely something that I'm going to say, hey, we probably need to go ahead and replace that. We're taking a pretty serious hit to depth there as that's coming around. We're taking a hit on depth every time that turns around. And then we're going to, again, get into, we've got plants that are shallow planted and all that business. So I'm really going to try to avoid these severe chip blades. The last one, or the other picture here is making sure that we're keeping these discs in good repair. So does anybody know what size that disc was when it was new? This one that's 13.5 inches? It was 15 inches. Yeah, so they got 1.5 inches of life out of that. Now here at Precision Planting, what we find is that those discs should probably be replaced when they're at 14.5 inches on your standard Deere and Kinsey planters. Some of the case and AGCO stuff gets a little bit different, but Deere and Kinsey, 14.5 inches, that should have been replaced quite a long time ago. So as you can imagine, this guy was obviously having some pretty big furrow creation problems, which was actually how we ended up getting the picture of this disc. The other thing that we need to be making sure is the bearing still good, particularly on those planters that run a nitrogen system or a 2x2 system. Those are going to be your planters that struggle more with getting product into the bearing, and it starts to eat those up. So just make sure you're checking that stuff on those planters in particular. So something that we run into quite a bit is making sure new discs are true. So there's a lot of times that you can get a pallet full of new disc openers, and they look like this right here. They've got this large air gap underneath there. So if you were to put that on an axle or a bolt in the vise and you spin that thing's going to sit there and go like this, okay? So as you're planting across the field, what do you think it's doing? Same thing, right? It's doing this as it's going across the field. Now we're getting a W trench in some spots. We've got a narrow trench in other spots. We need to make sure that we're checking that before these guys get put on the planter and we get that corrected. So this guy here, dead level across that flat surface, we're good to go. We can put that one on. The other thing I want you to check, whether they're new or used, maybe we're not replacing discs this year, but we want to just check a couple and make sure we're still good. We've pulled one off to measure it. Make sure that they're still round, because we find a lot of times that the hub actually doesn't get punched in the center of that disc opener. So if you put that in the vise and you spin it this way with some sort of gauge beside it, you'll see that this thing will actually sit here and go, you know, it'll kind of wobble back and forth. We don't want that. Because again, now we've got one disc in deeper than the other at times, and we're again starting to create a W trench. Now we've got an air pocket under the seed that we may or may not be able to press out with a Keaton seed firmer in that case. But again, we just want to check this and make sure that our discs are still round. So, mismanaged openers. I've been talking about all these different things that we like to look out for when we're talking about disc openers. What can that look like? Right here, you guys see this strip down the center of the trench? That's what we call a W bottom, okay? So if you look at that seed trench, it looks like a W. And what happens is when that seed falls down in that trench, it has to pick one of two directions to go. It's got to end up here, or it's got to end up here. And the problem with that is we've now got a ribbon of soil down the center that is potentially putting an air pocket under that seed. Now we're going to take a hit to emergence. Now we've got a plant that's maybe that one leaf collar behind that we talked about earlier that we lost $2,000 on. So let's make sure that we're not getting a W bottom in the bottom of the trench. That'd be the inverse of too narrow, right? So both of those are going to be things we need to look for. All right. So getting towards the end of opening discs here, last thing that we want to be checking is when we shim these, we need to make sure that we've got the correct contact amount on those discs. So on everything besides a case planter, so case planters the discs do not touch. Everything besides that, we need a contact point here. So those discs actually contact, and we've got these handy dandy business cards from Precision Planting that tell you, okay, if I have whatever planter here, that's how big my disc should be. And then on the back side of that business card, it tells you what that contact point should be. So if you guys get those, we can go through that, and when you're setting those, you're basically just measuring that gap between those two. So you take one, slide it in from the bottom, take the other one, slide it in from the top, measure the distance between the two. When those start to grab, that's our contact point. So the last thing I want to touch on as far as shimming those is this last one here. Try to keep your shims as even as possible. It doesn't cause huge issues, but it's just a best practice that as we're shimming these disc openers and setting that contact point, make sure our shims are fairly even on each side. It can kind of be easy to just stack them all on one side. That way we just can kind of put it all together quick, knock it out, and keep rolling. But let's try to keep those even if we can. You'll have a little bit easier life on that row unit by doing that. So, gauge wheels. So I'm going to show you a video here. It's going to be this one right here. And I'm proud to say that I'm a Buckeye. I actually have 2 degrees from there. And I'm very, very, very proud to say that this video is actually from Texas A&M. So hopefully we can get it to play here. This is actually on a plot planner at Texas A&M University. An intern at PTI took this video, and after he had been at PTI for the summer, he took this video and he sent it to all of us and thought, you guys could probably use this in a presentation somewhere. And we said, absolutely, we can use the crap out of that. So we need to make sure that we're getting those gauge wheels shimmed up tight, make sure that they've got a light scrubbing action against the disc openers. And then as far as the gauge wheel arms go, we want to make sure that we've got good gauge wheel arms. We don't want big worn spots in there. And additionally, those gauge wheel arms, as they travel up and down across the field, particularly on the threaded style, so like a factory style gauge wheel arm, the way that those are threaded together, they have to have some slop so you can actually thread them together, correct? So as that wears, we can really get some fast wear out of those arms on this threaded style. So try to find something with maybe like a bushing or a bearing type design. And even better if you can find one that's maybe got a wear cap on top of here to keep that arm from actually getting worn out, and then you can just replace that wear cap and then that bearing or the bushing inside. So, you guys see this here? See this wheel just dragging away? Do we think we did a good job shimming that? I said we wanted a gentle scrubbing action. This one was not very gentle, right? This was, we got this one a little too tight, so we need to back that off and keep that wheel spinning. So what we're actually getting there, we're getting some pretty serious plowing here on this side. Granted, this was in really loose dirt. If you got this into some no-till ground, would it probably turn? Yeah. Would it probably wear in? Yeah. But if you ever get into conventional till, always make sure that you're paying attention and you got somebody that can check things out on that first field of conventional ground. My computer does not like these videos. All right, so this is what we should have if we get our shimming correct, right? So as you can see, those wheels are turning. We've got a little bit of scrubbing action right here on those disc openers. It's keeping a good tight seal against there. We're not getting any dry dirt that's falling in there behind that gauge wheel, because actually what can happen is if that dry dirt gets in behind that gauge wheel, as it turns, it's gonna throw that dirt up. And you guys aren't gonna believe this, but I've seen it. As that dirt comes around, it's gonna fly up, it's gonna hit the boot at the base of the meter, okay? And when that happens, it can actually push that boot up far enough that dirt is gonna fall down the seed tube. And then we get the phone call saying, I've got these electric drives and I just spent all this money and this thing cannot plant the right population to save its life. And after a number of phone calls back and forth, eventually someone from product support goes out to check this planter out, and we're riding on the back of it, and you can see a rooster tail of dirt actually flying up and falling back down the seed tube. and then we're counting that as seed falling, okay? So make sure whenever we're doing this, we're not getting that dirt flying up. Additionally, that dry dirt that comes up like that and then falls back down the seed tube, that's now introducing dry dirt right beside your seed, okay? So we want to make sure that we're planting into moisture. We don't want to be adding dry dirt into there and create an issue on that end. Okay, so moving into depth here, how many of you guys have one of these type of tools? A couple of you guys got one? Awesome. These make great digging tools. So do every other digging tool on the planet, including your pocket knife, right? These ones, we just put a handy dandy little scale on there for you. That way you can measure it that way. But make sure that you're getting out and digging, guys. The best corn planter you'll ever meet in your life, or the best corn planter operator you ever meet in your life, gets the least done out of anybody you ever met in your life, okay? Because he's always out of the cab. He's always back there digging. He's always seeing how he's doing. So make sure that whenever you guys are out there, stop and dig and check things out. So what are we looking for? We're looking for wear on our depth stop. So this is our depth stop. This is actually what comes up and engages our gauge wheels. So this shoulder bolt right here will start to wear, and we're going to start to introduce slop into there that way. So this is kind of a chart just laying out about what your notches should be on your new planters. But I want you guys to make sure that whenever you're getting a new planter, and this is either the dealership is doing this, you guys are personally doing this, make sure you're truing that depth of what that should be to the planter. And then what you can do is you can go through and make a mark and see, okay, where actually is that depth actually at? So that's where I say we need to block check every row. So what I like to do is I'll take a 2x4 and I'll actually put a piece of 1/2-inch plywood on top of it. So now I've got a 2-inch block, because the 2x4 isn't actually 2 inches, right? So I've got a 2-inch block. I'll take 2 of those and I'll pick up each gauge wheel with that. So whether I set the planter down on the ground on top of them, or I take a plate and put those on top of that plate and use a floor jack and come up to the row unit, it doesn't matter either way. But that's how we can zero these rows out and check what's actually going on. We need to have some known value that we reference these marks to, okay? So in terms of planting depth, we're talking about that here. I want to share some PTI data that we've found over the years. So what they found up there, this was a 2022 study, that 1.75 inches was the optimum planting depth. So why do we all plant 2 inches? That's how we've always done it, right? It's into moisture, that's right. We want to make sure that in our ground, we're into moisture when we're planting. And in Pontiac, Illinois, I would be willing to bet that that moisture line was somewhere around 1.25 inches to 2 inches, right? So make sure that just because PTI said 1.25 inches was optimum planting depth, I want you guys to come back here to Ohio. Let's validate that. Let's see, where is my optimum planting depth? Now, we can make some pretty strong assumptions based off of the -30 and 19 bushels that we probably don't need to test 1.25 inches, right? But I encourage you guys, this spring, maybe run a little test plot, see what works on your guys' operation, and start to get some multi-year data, because the shallower we can get those plants, we've got a better chance of getting those out of the ground a little faster, right? Get a little more heat to them, get them out of the ground a little quicker. But one thing that I want you guys to notice on this chart, what did all of these deeper planting depths do? They didn't lose us near as much as going shallow, right? If we can keep plants into moisture, we're going to be a lot better off than if we go the other way and get them shallow and out of moisture. So here's kind of that jig I was talking about earlier, guys. 2x4 with a 1/2-inch plywood on top of it, and we're going up against those gauge wheels. This should all be on the same plane, okay? So your 2x4s, your disc opener, and your other 2x4, that should all be across the one same plane. That's how we can then go in and zero that row unit out. Okay, so we're getting kind of into the thick of it here. I want to talk about closing. So there's a million different closing systems out there, right? I told you guys there was a lot of row cleaners. There's even more closing options, right? You've got stuff that can go on the seed tube. You've got stuff that can go in between your stock closing system. Every year at the National Farm Machinery Show, it's one of my favorite things to do is to sit out in my truck and watch one guy loading his poly twisters into the next guy's truck, and then you'll see somebody else pull up, and this guy's got germinators, and they're trading those out. It happens every year at the National Farm Machinery Show, and I love to see guys trying to do better, right? Because the one thing that I know is that the guy that's selling those used, he made one step up, and the guy that's buying them used is making one step up. So everybody's just doing a little bit better every year, and I love to see that. So how can we do a little bit better with the equipment that we already own? First thing is going to be a scratch test. Now, I will say, guys, we probably shouldn't do the scratch test here in Bill's new shop, right? Bill might get a little grouchy if we go scratching his concrete up. But if you've got a neighbor, you know, you can go over to his place and do this. But what I want you guys to do is set that planter down and pull ahead a little bit on the concrete. And what that's going to do is it's going to scratch a line in that concrete or the asphalt. And now we've got a line that we can set our closing tail off of. We want to make sure that we're centered over that trench, and this is how we're going to do it. When we start doing this, so this was actually down in Brazil with some of our dealers down there, and you can see this black Sharpie line they traced over the scratch so we could see it in the picture. See how far off they were? What do you think this first stage was doing? That was probably moving seed, right? We were far enough off in that case that we were probably starting to move some seed. So I want you guys to make sure that you take the opportunity to do a scratch test. It really doesn't take very long as everything's accurate. Now, if we've been running this thing for a while, we might have a lot of work to do, right? We might find some issues that we need to get corrected. So do that scratch test. Make sure that our closing tail is lined up. We want to be equal in terms of side to side over that scratch. Can't click my clicker ahead, so we're going to try this again. So I want to talk about this one right here quick. This is a spike wheel closing tail. I don't have anything personally against these. I think that there is a place for these in some pretty heavy ground. I think these are an acceptable option. However, if you guys are running these, I want you to make darn sure that these are not flicking seed, because it's very, very, very easy for these to start to move seed. So when you guys are thinking about running these, I want to make sure that if you're running them, let's check, let's make sure everything's good. And that's the guy that needs to be getting out and checking things. Okay. So our closing tail, we've got it centered over the row. Now we need to see, are we too narrow, are we too wide, or are we set correctly? So this closing tail, we're going to start on the too narrow side of things. So these are sucked up all the way against the closing tail. And so what happens is we've probably only got about 3/4 to an inch of a gap between there. And those things are so tight that now if we draw a line coming through that disc down to here, it's like right in this area. And if we were down in Texas planting cotton like I was talking about earlier, we'd be doing really good because we only planted that 3/4 of an inch deep, so we'd be right on top of that seed and we'd be closing that furrow. But we're here in Ohio and we're not planting 3/4 of an inch deep, so we were way too high. And what we did was we made a giant air pocket right here and we just sealed the top of it off. There's a huge air pocket right down the center. That furrow was never fully destroyed and crumbled back together. On the opposite of that, if we were too wide, you can see up here, we're almost like 2.5 inches probably between those two wheels if we measure from inside to inside. And then if we go down here and down here, we're way deeper than those seeds were actually planted, okay? And so we didn't do anything really in terms of closing. We maybe moved a little bit of dirt back on top of it, but we've still got this open trench laying on top. That open trench, if we get a rain event, what's that gonna do? It's gonna open right back up, okay? So if we don't do a good job closing, that open trench is gonna come right back open, and we're gonna have hatchet roots, and we're gonna have a lot of issues that way. So, last thing we got here is just right. So, essentially what we're trying to do on this one is we're trying to make it look like we went in, placed the seed, like we were never even there. So in this one, we've still got a little bit of sidewall. You can still hear maybe there's a little bit too much downforce in this particular scenario, and that's how we ended up with these kind of defined lines. But as you can see, we've pulled all of this furrow back together. It's all the way back together. That seed is placed in there, and there's no large open trench on top, and there's not a giant air pocket down the center. Unfortunately, it kind of looks like it in the picture, but that was just some dirt that fell out, but it is actually closed back together. So this right here is what we're looking for. It looks like we just placed the seed inside there and we were never even there. That's what we want to see. we've reset soil density, we've properly brought everything back together. Life is good. So, a couple things I want to leave you guys with is now is the time to catch these problems. Not in 3 months when we go to the field, not in 2 weeks after we plant, because they all came up and we went, oh boy, I'm calling Bill. His guy's got a problem on their hands, right? No, we want to catch these problems now. We want to make sure that we're getting these fixed in the shop. It's a lot more fun to work on them in the shop now than it is in the middle of the field with no tools and you're in the middle of the sun, right? So let's get them fixed here in the shop, not out here when we're seeing problems after emergence. So what can you guys do right now to create a better opportunity for you guys to be more profitable in 2025? The first one's right here on this page, getting meters ran. Making sure we've got good singulation, we've got good spacing is critical in terms of yield. So these are things we can do right now. Bringing meters in here and having these guys take care of them is going to be a good first step. This one here, everyone will appreciate that, right? If we maybe forgot that there's seeds still in a hopper, let's go get that cleaned out. Let's get that taken care of. And I think Justin would even appreciate if you cleaned them out before you brought them into him. That way he didn't have to mess with them, right? That's correct. Oh, okay. So the next thing down there, run meters on the test stand. We've talked about that. Let's get those on a Meter Max Ultra. Let's get them tested to make sure they're performing the way they should be. If they need to have some parts replaced, maybe a vac seal, maybe a singulator, something like that, let's get those on the test stand. Let's get them ran. Let's make sure they're in good health. And the last thing, we're a bit late for it now because it's already got cold. But go ahead and winterize liquid systems even if you haven't got to it yet. If you winterize it now, you can figure out what's froze, what broke, what needs replaced, get parts ordered. Even if you didn't do it already and it's already been cold, go ahead and winterize that system. You can find problems now that you can get corrected ahead of time. So with that, thank you guys for having me here. I think we're going to maybe do a short break, and then I think Shane's going to come up and talk to you guys about sprayers. So again, thank you guys.